Mr. Pond Boss, tell me what to do to make all my Lunker Lake dreams come true.
Hello everybody, Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss, coming at you live from World Headquarters of Pond Boss Magazine. Jason Nepstad, I can't believe you're not out in the mud chasing fish all around. Can't wait to hear more about that. You know, my mom always said, Jason, if it ain't one thing, it's another, and you kind of got to think through all this stuff. John Wilson, hey John, good to see you, buddy. You know, I just want to welcome to everybody, my fellow Americans and pond masters, for this State of the Union address about all things ponds tonight. We're going to have a little bit of fun. So you guys buckle up, pull up a chair, find you an adult beverage or a glass of tea, and come hang out. I got a lot of things I want to talk about. I just don't know what they're going to be yet. You know, so what I wanted to start off with is, you know the drill. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comment section. Leanne's got it. She did it. There's Leo checking in from the left coast. If you'll hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comment section, click like, and share this video to your news feed right now, your timeline, then you'll be eligible for a drawing for a Pond Boss hat and a mug. $35 a year, folks. That's all it takes to get you signed up for Pond Boss Magazine, the world's leading authority on all things ponds. I see Joyce Earl checking in. That's Leanne's mom. Good to see her today. See here, I'm going to scroll down on my laptop and see who all's checking in right quick so I know who all's here. I kind of see some of you guys on the phone, but it's better to see it here. Clayton Bounds. Let's see. Good to see you, Clayton. Let's see. Looks like we got, 17 people. That's excellent. That's a good start. Good start. What I want to talk about tonight is kind of the, just where we are this time of year. You know, most of the time, Puxatawny Phil has seen his shadow, so we're destined for 6 more weeks of winter. Well, that may be the case with you guys that are still reeling from the polar vortex, but here in Texas, the last 3 days, it's been in the 80s and 70s, and where it's abnormally cold for you guys in the north, it's abnormally warm for us. And it seems like every winter we get here in North Texas, we get a handful of those, I guess you'd call them bluebird days. But there's another front coming. We had some rain today, and temperature's about to fall again. You know, the rising and falling temperatures are oftentimes hard on our ponds, and that's where, in my opinion, the northern ponds kind of have an advantage because your ponds are insulated from those temperatures. We don't have ice here, you know, and when we don't have ice, then we don't have all the stability that you guys have under the ice in terms of temperatures, because our temperatures go up and down and up and down. I saw a plum tree with blooms on it today. That thing ain't going to make it. Those blooms are going to freeze. We're going to see it again. Let's see here. Who else we got? I'm going to scroll down there and see who all we got checking in, because I see some comments coming up. If I can make my machine work down here. Here we go. There's Fred Bingaman checking in from Key West, hanging out in the good spot. Troy Todd, Pat Williamson, Chris Ketchum. Hey, Chris, haven't seen you in a while. Glad you're here. Timothy Klein just checked like and shared it. Thanks, Timothy Klein. We appreciate that. When the temperatures are going up and down, nature really doesn't know what to do. You know, because when the ground temperature hits a certain point, things start to grow. Grass grows. You know, buds on trees start to form. Now we're getting a little bit longer photo periods. So nature's just about ready to wake up from the wintertime, but when it gets slam dunked by a polar vortex in the north, things aren't working. I'd love to hear from John Wilson and you guys are up in the northern part of the country as to what happened with those double-digit negative temperatures, you know, for several days. I mean, did trees freeze and split? What has it done to the insects? How about the animals? You know, did it freeze animals to death? I'm really interested in learning about that. There was I'll talk a little news. There was a news release sent to me from a radio talk show host. About once a month, I'll do a Saturday or Sunday morning radio talk show out of Austin. And the talk show host is a fishing guide, and he likes to kind of hear the other perspectives, like kind of stuff I do. So we'll talk about things. He sent me a news release, and it seems as though on January 26th, there was a 14.5-pound largemouth bass caught in a 250-acre public lake on the north side of Fort Worth, Texas, Marine Creek Lake. Now, several real interesting things about that fish. I want to share this with you guys. First of all, that fish is 13 years old, 14.58 pounds. Now, what the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department does is they have fine-tuned their genetic testing to the point, they've got their science pinned down so well that now they can not only tell you what level of Florida strain bass they've got or Florida genetics, they can tell you what level of northern genetics there is, and they can also tell if this fish is kin to that fish. So what's amazing to me is in 2006, ShareLunker number 410 was caught in Lake Conroe, which is down near Houston. They brought that fish in to the hatchery there in Athens, Texas, and they spawned it. And that fish, I don't know how many eggs it had, but 6,500 of those babies were taken to Marine Creek Lake and stocked into an existing bass fishery, where the year before they'd put 12,000 Florida bass fingerlings into that lake. So their goal was to see if some of those fish would survive and thrive and see if they could grow. So last year, I think it was number 566, ShareLunker 566 was caught in Marine Creek Lake, 13.06 pounds, I believe. And they compared the genetics of that fish and figured out that its mother was the Lake Conroe fish from 12 years prior. So this fish that was caught a couple of weeks ago, excuse me, is number 577, I think. That fish is the sister, a sister of the ShareLunker that was caught last year. Now, ShareLunker, when a bass is 13 pounds or bigger, taken out of a public lake, the state of Texas would like to preserve that fish, keep it healthy, keep it alive, and then bring it into the hatchery and hatch it. So there's Christy Hartzell checking in. Hey, family affair down in San Antonio at the, just showing some animals at the livestock show. Bill Russell, Michael Gray, Jason Davis, Jason Nebstead, 8 to 10 foot lake in the winter. Does the temperature stay warmer in the deeper water? No, it won't. That water, unless it stratifies, and now the good thing you got is you got water flowing in pretty heavy that's at constant temperature. Your threadfin shad may not make it if you get some cold. Now, Jason lives on a lake that's about 125 acres. They drained it down. Hey, Frank James. They drained the lake down quite a bit, and it's down into pretty much a puddle. I would bet 20 acres, 25 acres. So his question is will the threadfin shad make it if the water temperature drops? If the water hits 42, they're going to die. Now, with as many fish as there is in that lake, if the threadfin shad are concentrated, they're going to get eaten. Anyway, back to the ShareLunker stuff here. Let's see. Yep, okay, got y'all. I'm just making sure who's here. Chris Chavette is checking in from Innsbruck. Good to see you. Glad you joined in. A great speech you gave at the Society of Lake Management Professionals, Chris. You did a good job on that. Chris is a real ardent pondmeister, and good gosh, Innsbruck, where he lives out west of St. Louis, is just covered up in water. I mean, they've got hundreds of acres of water, many, many ponds and lakes. It's a beautiful place. So I'm going to go back to the ShareLunker thing. So what's happened is there's been 2 sisters caught out of that same batch of fish that was stocked in 2006 from a ShareLunker from Lake Conroe. So the significance of that, there's several things that are significant. First of all, they can identify that these fish are sisters, came from the same mother and the same father. So what's really cool about that is not only can they figure out that they're sisters that were stocked as babies in a 250-acre lake, but that they lived 13 years. Now, another little interesting thing is there's a lake probably 300 miles away north of Nacogdoches, Texas, where another one of these fish siblings were caught. So the moral of the story is that with supplemental stocking, using fish of what they perceive to be, the Parks and Wildlife Department perceives to be better genetics, introducing those into these existing fisheries, that in fact they can grow some big fish. Now, when you start kind of drilling down into the numbers, 6,500 fingerlings stocked, we know that half of those are boys. So they're not going to get very big. Half of them are girls. But of those girls, there's only a percentage of them that will have the genetic propensity and the aggressive nature if they get the opportunity. So I know what I would do. Texas Parks and Wildlife, they've got a lot of lakes to take care of. But I know what I'd be doing on that 250-acre lake. I'd have my electrofishing boat out there about the time spawns are occurring, and I'd be studying that fishery just to see how many of those fish have made it, what the numbers are, and all that kind of stuff. I'd be tracking those fish. Are there 8-pound fish that are 13 years old? Are there 7-pound fish that are 13 years old? Is there a bunch more fish that are as bigger than those two ShareLunkers? I'd want to know that. John Funk checking in from icy Michigan. Chad Donaldson, what's your thoughts on Trump's new wetland rules and the feds lighting up on wetland rules and digging in the waters of the United States? Well, you know what, Chad? I don't offer any political thoughts, but what I will offer is biological thoughts. If they're, and I don't know what the changes has been because, I saw the polar opposite changes under Obama. But I know this, that more government is never better for the private sector. And I understand that people that don't play morally and ethically right need to be regulated, and that includes everybody. But I don't have an opinion on Trump's new wetland rules because I don't know about it. But I do know this. When a rancher in Wyoming is fined $40,000 a day because he built a livestock pond under Obama's regime, there's something wrong with that too. So somewhere in the middle, there's a good medium. I do believe in protecting wetlands, especially natural wetlands, and I believe in mitigating for wetlands if somebody's going to do something in it. If they're going to dig in the waters of the United States, there's rules, and we got to abide by those rules. And the one thing about those rules is they're going to change. So I can't really offer a political opinion. I got out of that business because what I think about politics is irrelevant. What I think about fish and ponds and lakes is real relevant because that's what I do. I'm not going to be the Dixie Chicks going and talking about a president. I'm not going to pull that kind of stuff. But what I am going to do is tell you that if there's a good idea and somebody wants to do something that's healthy and productive for the environment, that they should have a right to do that, or at least have a right to not get their thumb stuck down their throats, by the government. That's what I think. Craig Guffin, Daniel Hendrick. Let's see, Sears. So Leo says, well said, Bob. Hey, thanks, man. I'm not running for office and I'm not running from office, but I am going to talk about fish because that's what I know. Let's talk about the State of the Union of ponds and lakes. Hit me with some questions. This is the time of year when ponds aren't dormant, but they're about as slow moving as they're going to get. Here in Texas, I've said this before, but here in Texas, we don't go ice fishing because the only ice we have is in a drink like that, which I think I'll have a sip. So in the northern part of the country, that's one of the biggest pastimes. I know guys that wait all year long just for ice to form so they can go fishing. My point is this, is even when it's cold like this, there's biological activity, but as ice off gets nearer, things are going to change. When the photoperiod lengthens, our days get longer, plants are going to start to grow, and things are going to start to change. And I think it's wise if you, as a pond owner, would be ready to pay attention to that and be aware that the changes are going to happen. I got a call from Chuck Brinkman. Chuck's on this Facebook page, on this broadcast often. He'll probably be checking in here in a little bit, but Chuck called me earlier this week and he said, hey, Bob, my pond froze. He's up there west of St. Louis. And he's got a small pond out in the backyard. He's got his wife and two little girls love that pond. They love to go fishing. And it's about time for them to start harvesting some fish. And they had some ice, they had a couple of cold fronts. Well, with the weather we had this week, the ice came off. Well, when he walked around the pond, he looked down and he saw what looked like some algae growing, but it was in the shape of a frog. So he pulled them out, and he saw two of them. There were two dead bullfrogs that were covered in a mossy-like substance. And he said, what in the world, do I have anything to worry about with my fish? Do you think these dead frogs, what do you think happened? Well, what I think happened was, and this is what I told him, what I think happened is the water got so cold so quick and iced up so fast, the temperature of the water probably dropped 12 or 15 degrees, and the frogs didn't do what frogs usually do. And these frogs were stressed, probably got a bacterial infection, then they covered it with a fungus. And the fungus is what killed them, and that's what he thought was algae on there. So those frogs died. His big concern was, could that be a disease? And could it be, are my fish going to die? I tried to assure him that his fish weren't going to die from that was probably an anomaly, because those frogs were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, what frogs can do is they can burrow. This is a pretty interesting little factoid if you don't know it. Frogs can kind of wallow down in the mud a little bit, kind of go into hibernation, and slow their metabolism rate so low that they can absorb enough oxygen through their skin to keep their blood nourished with oxygen and not have to come up and try to breathe, which that's kind of cool. Let's see here. Jason says, what water temperature is best to stock bluegill? Should I bother with getting from multiple hatcheries? Well, Jason, first things first, you gotta deal with what you're dealing with now, which is the lake is drawn down. Now, when the lake fills back up, water temperature to stock bluegills, and really stock any game fish, the best time to do that is when the temperature is, I'm going to tell you, in the upper 50s going up, preferably 60 degrees up to about 80. That's the best window. Now, you can stock fish cooler and warmer, but there's really no advantage to stock bluegill when the water temperature is 48 degrees. Because all they're going to do is lay there and kind of be dormant. But when the water temperature comes up into the 60s, then they can get active, they can start to feed, they can start to thrive. So I'd be looking at the low 60s to stock bluegills. Should you get them from multiple hatcheries? I think that's a good idea, because if you get them from several places, you're going to get a mixed gene pool. It's most bluegill hatcheries, they'll take 20 pairs of fish and put them in one pond that may be 4 acres or something, and then all the babies those fish have, that's what they're going to sell. So if you get some fish from this hatchery and some from that hatchery, and get some off the fish truck where you are in North Carolina, talk to Foster Lake and Pond Management as well. They'll help you get some. But mixing up the gene pool is always a good idea when you want to come back and restock. Also, should I expect the stocked bluegill to get any spawns first year? Absolutely. Believe it or not, when bluegill hit about 2.5 inches in length, they'll start spawning. I mean, when we were shocking your lake in Fayetteville there, McFadden Lake, we were shocking up bluegill that were 3.5 inches long and sexually mature. Which that's not normal to see in a big lake like that, but in small hatchery ponds, that's real normal to see. So 2.5 to 3 inch long bluegill, especially when they're underpopulated, they will start spawning real soon as the water temperature is warm enough and they can go in and start making beds. Let's see here. There's I see Barry Mounts, Tom Davis. Let's see here. Leo says, like Texas, we have a massive fluctuation going from 25 degrees to as high as 70 or even in the mid 80s. We have a massive influx of rainwater stirring up pretty much everything in the bottom. What are we expecting of possible death across the board? I tell you what, Leo, I don't know that I ever expect death because nature is so resilient. Now, if this happened in the summertime, I'd say there was a higher risk of death because your water would be stratified. You'd have that warm layer sitting on top of that anoxic or without oxygen lower layer. That lower layer of anoxic water is the one that causes the problem in the situation like you described. But here, this time of year, now in Southern California where you are, if your water's stratified, then you may have a problem. But typically, when you're averaging air temperatures averaging from 40 to 60, you don't have that. Look at that. Sean McNulty's driving through Texas. Dude, I didn't know you were coming through Texas. Holy cow, that's pretty cool. I'll call you later on. Just catch up with you, man. Let's see. Daniel Hendrick. Let's see, make sure I answered Leo's question good enough. I would not expect death across the board. I'll tell you this. If any fish die in those conditions, it's probably not environmental and they should go. Now that might sound a little cruel, but it's one of those survival of the fittest. Because with that change of temperatures from 25 to 70 or even 80, the water temperature, depending on the depth of the lake, it might fluctuate 10 or 12 degrees. Fish can handle that. What they can't handle is the anoxic, toxic water that sometimes you got to deal with. Let's see here. Daniel Hendrick says, can livestock and good fish cohabit, or good fish habitat? Can livestock and good fish habitat coexist? I've seen that. But I don't know the best answer. Here's the answer. When you've got livestock, it depends on your numbers, really. I mean, if you're overgrazing a pasture, then you're going to have an influx of nutrients that might enhance the fishery. But it won't do it for long before it starts to degrade water quality. The two things that livestock do to fishing lakes is they don't degrade the habitat unless they're watering where you have spawning beds. If that's the case, then they do. Then they'll inhibit it. If the fish have other place to go to spawn, they will. But what livestock can do is they can cause unnecessary erosion by beating down the shoreline, where wave action can erode the shoreline. They form trails where when it rains, water will come down the trails and erode those trails, and all that silt ends up in your pond. And in the upper watershed, the waste that they provide can be too much for a pond to support. I've investigated dairy lagoons many times where there was no doubt in my mind that there were so many cows in that pasture that they had a measurably diminished impact or a hard impact on the water quality. So in that case, they don't coexist as well. Let's see here. Frank James, like Manny, I battle cormorants. When are they a plus, if they ever are? And when are they a minus? Are there any lawsuits ongoing to reverse the federal prohibition on shooting them? Well, let me tackle the lawsuits first. I don't know that there's lawsuits, but I do know that there's a review going on. And what they're trying to figure out with agencies is just what impact cormorants have. Now, there is an effort going on. Stephen Barden, who's the Texas Pro Lake Management stellar star fisheries biologist here in Texas, is working with a number of pond management companies around the country to help quantify the effects of cormorants. Now, you ask me this, when are they a plus? I'll tell you when they're a plus. And I've seen it a few times, but not many. But it's if you have a bass-crowded lake that you can't keep up with harvest, and a flock of cormorants come and help you harvest your fish, that's a plus. And I've seen that. I've seen several lakes that were overcrowded with bass, and the landowner wouldn't do anything about it, and then fast forward a few years and go back and check it when he's ready to do something about it, and the bass aren't crowded anymore because the cormorants thinned them out. When are they a minus? Every other time. You know, you do not want cormorants eating your young fish, especially if you got a young lake. So that's kind of an issue. So as a general rule, cormorants are not good for most lakes. Now, if you know your lake and your bass are crowded, it's okay for cormorants to come eat some of them. But that's only for people that know what they're doing and know what's going on. And when you read the literature, it's almost like cormorants only eat shad. Well, I'm going to tell you that's not true. It may be true on public lakes because that's the dominant species in the part of the water that the cormorant lives in. You know, but I'll tell you what I remember about cormorants that really made me start paying attention. I had two things happen. Now, the first one was in 1983. I drove up on the levee of a pond and I saw a cormorant dive. And I'd not seen cormorants up to that time because their numbers were just beginning to explode back into big numbers. And I saw this cormorant dive. And it was down 3 or 4 minutes and it came right back up. And I could not believe the size of the fish that it had sideways in its mouth. It was flopping. Well, the cormorant tilted its head back, threw that fish up, flipped it, and swallowed it whole. Well, I knew I had time to go back and get a shotgun and come back and shoot the dadgum thing, which I did. But it was in a 20-acre lake, so it took me about 20 minutes to go get a shotgun. It took me about another 30 minutes to get close enough to it, because every time it would see me, it would dive and swim, and I'd drive around the levee till I could get close enough, finally shot it. Then it was probably another 20 minutes before it floated to the shore. So I had a stick in the back of the truck, actually a shovel, and I got the shovel and pulled that thing back in, pulled it over, dropped the tailgate, got my pocket knife out, and cut it open. And boy, I reeled back. I could not believe it. First of all, it reeked. And when I cut that bird's stomach open, thousands of little round worms just poured out of it onto the tailgate of my truck. And that fish fell out on my tailgate, and it was covered in those worms. Its eyes were already gone. It had been digested. Its scales were coming off. Well, I weighed and measured that fish. It was 15 inches long and weighed 1 pound, 7 ounces. So that was revelationary to me. So cormorants digest their fish with parasites that are symbiotic, where they help each other. The second thing that happened was after I moved to North Texas, probably 1985 or 86, I read a story in the Sherman newspaper where a guy was fishing up here in Lake Texoma, jug lining for a big blue cat, and he was using green sunfish for bait. And he caught about a 60-pound blue cat on one jug line, went around the next one where he was fishing in 45 feet of water, and he caught a cormorant 45 feet deep. Those dadgum birds can dive down 45 feet deep. So for guys like us, pondmeisters, you know, cormorants are really not a friend. I'm going to tell you another one, though, you guys need to be paying attention to. You need to be watching out for otters. Our good friend Bob McFarland, he and his wife Donna, they love wildlife. They're the wood duck experts of East Texas. That's what they do. Bob checks in from time to time. And Bob sent me a picture of a couple of otters on their dock a couple of years ago. And I said, dude, you need to, they're beautiful. They love to play. They're fun to watch. Shoot them. Well, Donna wasn't going to do that. No way. She loves wildlife. You know, I don't blame her. So my response back to him was, do you like the otters better than you like the wildlife? And so I think it was last week, I got a picture of Donna holding up the remnants of a 6-pound bass. And I may put this picture in Pond Boss in May, June issue. And it had just been shredded. And Donna went and shot the otter. So she finally figured out that the balance for her was going to be, I love the otters, I love the fish more. Let's see here. Victor Moberg checking in. Shannon Kane from Sherman checking in. Rusty Hart. Hello there. Brett Olson. I have missed this. I may have missed this, but did you get any answers on those hybrid crappie on how they're doing in smaller ponds? Yeah, I'll tell you about hybrid crappie. Matter of fact, I got to spend some time with Bobby Glennon from Malone and Sons Fish Farm over in Arkansas. He's the guy that's been working on those. And he's been able to hybridize the fish, but they still reproduce. Now, they don't reproduce nearly as much, and he's still trying to wrap his brain around it and quantify it, but he's kind of lost his enthusiasm because, you know, even if a crappie only reproduces a third of the amount as either one of the parents, that's still too much for small bodies of water. So, but in terms of growth rate, they seem to grow pretty good. So if you're going to have crappie, regardless of whether they're hybrids, black crappie, black-nosed crappie, white crappie, whatever, you need to be prepared to deal with their inconsistent spawning and their tendency to overpopulate when they do spawn. Let's see here. Oh, we got some good questions coming in. Troy Todd says, how late can pond dye be applied in southern Indiana without affecting newly spawned fish in the spring? Depends on how much dye you put out, Troy. You can do it now because I don't think that your fish are going to spawn until probably April. Now, I'm presuming we're talking about bluegill and largemouth bass and that sort of thing. But what you can do is just put enough dye in, you know, to turn the water just a light blue, not that deep, rich blue. And within about 6 weeks, depending on how much rain you get as well, it's going to cycle out. Let's see here. Chad Donaldson, have you ever heard of any health risk using green outdoor wood treated pylons in a fish pond? Outdoor wood treated pylons. No, I don't know that. I do know that when we use treated wood, that, you know, I want to make sure I know what it's treated with, and I tend to avoid it, but I think for pylons in a fish pond, it's probably not going to be that big a deal. Okay, Mark Dyer's got it. Hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. If you'll do that, click like, share this to your timeline right now. You're eligible for a drawing for a hat and a Pond Boss mug. Time for a commercial. It's 7 o'clock. Boy, this is going by fast. Pond Boss Magazine. This is the January-February issue. Hey, you know what? The March-April is going to press right now. Got a gorgeous sunset picture that was submitted by one of our readers. Matter of fact, Matt Bonner, one of his buddies shot that photograph, and he's in it, backlit in a sunset that made the cover of the next issue of Pond Boss. And you're going to be interested in seeing and reading some of the articles in this next issue. I'll just leave the tease right there. If you guys haven't subscribed, please do. $35 a year. I'm going to take Debbie out for Valentine's Day. I'll spend way more than that, and that'll be gone the next day. This keeps on giving for a year. Hope you're laughing at that. Let's see. Chris Chavetta says, what would you recommend for an aeration, size of compressor, number of diffusers, etc., in a 1-acre lake, 20 feet deep, stocked for bluegill rearing? We're planning to stock 2,000 bluegill and feed them. You know, Chris, here's what I want to do. I tell you what I do. I sit down and work with our vendors and our Pond Boss advertisers. And what I would like to do is just visit with you more about that. And then we'll create a drawing and submit that to several of the vendors and have them design it for us, because they've got engineers on staff that will do that. And then we'll figure out how big a compressor you need. And that's going to be based on depth. So you've got 20 feet deep. We won't aerate 20 feet deep. We'd probably only aerate down 12 to 15 feet and leave a thermal refuge below that. You know, so we could figure out how many diffusers that you need, where they need to be placed, how big the compressor needs to be, and which kind of compressor to get. So there's some science behind that, and I lean on our vendors And with my biologist here, I'm going to switch gears at Bob Lusk Outdoors, they help work that out. So then they can price it out, you know, and you won't get a better deal if you work through the vendors than you would with us, and you get all the engineering and my guys' help too. Let's see here. Victor Moberg, too much work. No, I get that, dude. I'm in business for myself too. Let's see. Mark Dyer, is there a benefit to hybridizing bluegill and redear? You know, over the years, there's been several hatcheries that do that. And the benefit is you've got a fish that will feed more diversely in the food chain, but won't necessarily get any bigger than either parent. Which that was part of the reason that people tried to hybridize them, because they thought with hybrid vigor, that fish would get better. Over time, it was just like all other sunfish. You know, the fact though, it just doesn't reproduce. You know, and now one thing about a hybrid, here's a real important thing. Hybrid bluegill, hybrid redear cross, they'll feed in the natural food chain, but it's really, really hard to get them to eat fish food. Bluegill will eat fish food, redear won't, unless they're conditioned by a guy like Bruce Condello, you know, where that's what has time to do every day, teach him how to eat fish food. You know, they're not going to do that in a pond. Let's see here. Victor Moberg, you can relocate the otter or otters if you don't want to kill them. Might need to contact the game warden. Yeah, well, you know, that's a good point. And I'll just leave it right there. That's a good point. Mark Finn, Zip from the Pond Boss family. Hope you're healing up while I am. Look here, I can raise both hands now. Almost get that one up. I'm, 3.5 weeks past rotator cuff surgery, so things are working pretty good. Frank James, Paul, yeah, good job. Kyle Mosel, Shannon Kane, Chris Blood's joining in. Hi, Chris. I just saw you sent me an email. I'll read it and respond back here in a little bit. Jennifer Royce, Jonathan Webb, new subscriber here. I need to replace my failing overflow pipe. Do you have a good resource I can go to for the best way to fix this, or any suggestions? Yes, Jonathan, go to the pondboss.com website, click on the resource guide, and go to earth moving contractors or pond builders and start calling some of those guys and talk to them. Now, since you've asked that question, I'm going to tackle it just for a little bit here. When you have an overflow pipe that's failing, we got to know why it's failing. Is it failing because it's seeping around the outside and the dirt starting to collapse around it? Is it metal and corroded? Is it a concrete pipe that's separated? If we know what the problem is, when you say that it's failing, if we know why it's failing, then it's easier to offer a solution. I was looking at a lake yesterday that had an overflow pipe that it is a 50-acre lake too in Jack County, Texas, northwest of Fort Worth. These folks just bought this place and the dam had failed. Well, I got to looking at the spillway, and there's no way that dam failed because the water breached the top of the dam. But what had happened was that lake was built probably in the late 50s, early 60s, and they used concrete culvert that slips together, that was one of the things to use back in the late 50s, early 60s. But they didn't have a rubber grommet or a rubber seal in there to seal it. And over time, as the earth moved a little bit, some of that concrete, one of those sections of concrete pipe separated and started washing out as the water would overflow the top of the pipe. And as it did, it would erode some dirt, and pretty soon the water, the seal separated enough that water would push further out, and would washed all the way around the pipe. And then they had a big enough rain event in 2015 that was a flood, that enough water overflowed the top, flowed down, then flowed out the outside of the pipe that just eroded the dirt enough that the dam collapsed. And when it collapsed enough to get to the water line, it just shot through, and it had about a 60-foot wide hole in it. Now, if you've got a galvanized pipe, for example, or a steel pipe that's corroded over a span of 50 years, you could maybe pump that full of concrete and not have to worry about digging it up and replacing it. So it depends on why it's failing, on how you would want to fix it. I'd be talking to Mike Otto, Michael Gray, guys like that. That's who I'd be talking about. Holy cow, somebody's calling in the middle of the day. Let's see who that is. I have no idea. I'm not going to answer it. So now, throw me some more questions. If not, I'm going to tackle some other topics as I think about them. I want to go back to that ShareLunker. Let's see, Jonathan Webb. Here we go. It's steel pipe that's rotted on the bottom and both ends. It's not a total loss, just want to prevent failure. It's currently a 10-inch well casing from the early 80s. Okay, that means you've got corrosive water, and if it's rotted on the bottom and both ends, is it in the bottom of the dam or the top of the dam? If it's in the top of the dam and at an angle going through, I think I would probably pump that sucker full of concrete. I'd weld a plate on the end of it, and then I would pump it full of concrete. I think that would be your best answer. But before you go do that, have somebody that knows what they're doing come look at it. Call some of the guys. Call Clint Steffens, Mike Otto, Michael Gray, and talk to them, and they're all in the Pond Boss Resource Guide. Talk to those guys, because they can help you with that. Because well casing, if it's corroded since the early 80s, holy cow, that's 40 years. Yeah, so that could very well be what's going on. You've got water and soils that are corrosive, and you do need to do something about it. You know, it could be if it's only rotten a certain ways down, you might be able to dig back a little bit when the pond's low, cut it off, and weld a new piece on it. Somebody needs to come look at that. There's a whole lot of answers to that question. I just don't know what the problem really is. So I want to go back to the ShareLunker topic for a minute. Some more interesting things to me about the ShareLunker thing is now, you know, in today's world, we can start tracking the genetics of fish. And actually with my little company, Bob Lusk Outdoors, we're doing some of that. And it's really fun because we've got some clients that are pretty dead-gum serious about growing some huge, huge fish. You know, I can't tell you how many times somebody calls me and says, hey, Bob, I want to grow the biggest bass on the planet. And inside I'm thinking, I bet you do. Are you willing to make that commitment? Because if you're going to make that commitment, that means we're going to be doing some real serious digging into the science of that lake. We want to make sure that the water is highly productive, but safe and healthy, and my favorite word's happy. You know, because we want water to be autonomous. We want it to be consistent. We don't like it to change, because if water temperatures go way up and down all the time, you know, the chemistry changes, the biology changes. That's a stressor for fish. So if we can figure out how to manage the health of the water to where it minimizes the risk on the health of the fish, then we have more growth days. The second thing is we want to be sure we've got the right kind of habitat for those fish to really grow, which we want them to be couch potatoes. We don't want them to have to go very far to eat a healthy meal, which means we also want to have a healthy meal. You know, that might mean supplemental feeding. That might mean stocking crawfish, rainbow trout, threadfin shad, gizzard shad. You know, it may mean tilapia. Who knows? But that's part of the game plan. And one of the more important things is we got to be prepared to cull the underperforming fish at the right time. So if somebody wants to make a commitment to grow some big fish, then that can happen. Now, the ShareLunker thing, which is all over the news in Texas right now, and it's pretty amazing, is we got to remember this. 6,500 baby fish were stocked in that year class in a 250-acre lake. Fast forward 13 years, think about that, and now they got fish that are 13 to 14 and a half pounds. Now, how many do they have? I don't know, but I do know this, that the fish caught last year and entered in the program, and the fish caught 2 weeks ago and entered in the program, those fish were aggressive enough that they would hit an angler's hook, probably fishing from shore, because that's not a very big lake. Let's see here. We got Dan Durallop. Do you recommend removing trees on a dam or an older pond? On dam of an older pond? Typically not. And here's why. Matter of fact, the lake where the dam burst and they repaired it, I was looking at that dam yesterday, and there were probably, for this 50-acre lake, that dam's probably 250 feet long. And I bet you it had 15 elm trees on it that were 10 to 14 inches in diameter. Pretty big. And if they were to remove those trees, even from the backside slope, and remove the root ball, there's going to be a void in the dam which weakens it. If you were to cut trees down, I'll tell you this, don't take any trees off of an old dam unless they're 4 inches in diameter, down by the base where it first starts to come up. If they're 4 inches or smaller, you can take them off. But if they're not, if they're bigger than that, leave them alone. You'll cause more problems. Let's see here. Brett Olson. I brought up the Zander question of why couldn't a secluded lake couldn't be stocked with them in Spirit Wood in North Dakota? If it couldn't drain into another lake, why wouldn't it be tried? Only if it was secluded. I know a guy that caught 13 now, and he loves them. Biggest is 12 pounds. You know, right there is where guys in the private sector need to have a little bit of empathy with the public sector. You know, it's really, really easy for us to say, well, we want to bring in an exotic species of whatever it is and put it into our water, and our water is not going to communicate at all with other water. Well, you know, in theory, yeah, go ahead and try that. But in reality, the public sector, you know, agencies and state agencies, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they are scared to death, and rightfully so, with invasive exotic species of fish. Now, I know nothing about Zander, so I can't give you a real educated answer like with tilapia. I know they're going to die when the water temperature, tilapia Mozambique are going to die when it's 52 degrees. God says so. And I've seen them be right for 25 years when I put them into ponds. But I don't know anything about Zander. Wouldn't know one if I saw it. Don't know how they reproduce. Don't know how they behave in running water. You know, but I know that we as responsible stewards of our water need to have respect for not introducing exotic species into water that can at all have a risk of communicating with public waters. I get the secluded ponds. I get that. You know, I see secluded ponds all the time that have fish in them. There's no way they got there. I've seen fish. I've seen ponds on the side of a hill where there's no water upstream and there's a pond half a mile downstream and there's fish in it. People ask me how'd that happen. I don't know. Let's see here. Dusty Allen joined in. Victor Moberg, where can we get fish tagging equipment? You can get fish tagging equipment at matter of fact, you know, I think there's a couple of vendors on the Pond Boss resource guide on our website. But look up Floy, F-L-O-Y, tags. Just go to the University of Google and do that, and you'll see some. Chris Blood. Hey, and you know what? Let's talk about tagging for a minute. If you want to tag some fish, here's the basic reasons to do that. One is you want to track those individual fish. So when you tag a fish, weigh it, measure it, write down the date. If you'll do that, then later on when you catch that fish again, you can read the number on the tag and you can see if it's growing or not growing. You can use that to decide whether or not you're going to call that fish. The second reason is if you really want to try to get an estimate of the numbers of fish you've got. Let's say you got a 4-acre pond and you buy 40 tags. So you decide you're going to tag 40 bass 12 inches and bigger. So you do that. And then you come back in, you do that, say, over a period of a month. Then the next month you go out and you catch 100 bass and 10 of them are tagged. You can extrapolate how many fish you've got in your pond based on what your return rate was. And then you can get a good idea of how many fish you've got, which can also give you a good idea of how many fish you need to harvest. And looking at their relative weights, how big and fat, are they chunky, are they not? If they're not, start harvesting some. That's a good reason for tags. Chris Blood, hey Bob, what's the best way to reach you? Oh, we're going to do a commercial. Thanks, man. To come out to look at a lake and put together a plan for a fun fishery. Thank you very much, Chris. Chris is always looking out for Bob. Let me tell you guys. I've been waiting for this time. This is my 40th year in the private sector as a private fisheries biologist. Not only do I edit Pond Boss magazine, which goes out every other month, Pond Boss is in its 27th year, and I'm in my 15th year as editor of that magazine. But what I love to do, I make my living as a fisheries biologist, traveling the nation, helping people design, build, stock, manage, take care of private fishing lakes. And I've also got a small pond management company where I got several biologists on staff that we can actually go out and do the work. You know, we can get the fish, we can stock fish, we can fertilize ponds, we can set up feeders, which thanks to Texas Hunter, by the way, for being a sponsor of this show, as well as Purina Fish Food. So we can do all those things. And if you're out of our area, we've got guys all over the nation. We got American Sport Fish over in Alabama. I see Mark Dauber checking in. He lives right down the road from those guys. You know, we've got, John Wilson, Aqueduct up in Ohio area. They've got 5 or 6 offices. They can help you do a lot of things. But if you want to get me, you can get me by sending an email to boblusk@outlook.com. And if you need help designing a fishing program or a fisheries program, I'm happy to do that. If I'm the guy, I'll do it for you. If I'm not, I'll refer you to the guy. Let's see, there's thanks for making me do that, Chris. I should promote myself more. I'll never forget Ray Scott. Y'all love this story. We got time to tell it. And Mark Dauber is a great friend of Ray Scott's. And Mark will laugh at this because he knows it's true. I was at Ray's place, had gotten to know him over 2 or 3 years, and we had a pretty significant, still do have a significant amount of mutual respect. And I was at his conference table at his office, and right behind him, there's a sign on the wall that says, "If it ain't fun, we don't do it." And we had been bouncing some ideas around because Ray likes to build lakes, things like that. And then Ray, it got kind of quiet, and then he kind of pushed his hat back. He always had on a cowboy hat. And he looked at me and he says, "Hey, Bob, I want to tell you something. I think that you are the best fisheries biologist in the entire United States." And I said, "Wow, Ray, man, I'm flattered for you to say that." He said, No, I mean it. He said, there's guys out there that know more about the fishery sciences of this and that know more about the science than that, and know more about fisheries than this, but there's nobody that can communicate it like you can. And I said, "Ray, wow, man, that's fantastic. I'm humbled and flattered." And then he leaned a little further over. He says, "Now, don't you think that I'm the best lake designer in the United States?" I said, "Ray, you've got one of the best lakes in the entire United States. Yeah, you know how to design a lake." He said, "All right, here's what we need to do." He says, "I'm going to be telling people how good you are, and you need to be telling people how good I am about building lakes." He said, "Because here's the deal. If I go out bragging about me, it ain't the same as you bragging about me. And if you're out bragging about you, it's not the same as me bragging about you. So I'm going to go out and brag about you, and you brag about me, and we're going to have better customer relations. You willing to do that?" So here's the point. I like, Chris, thank you for promoting me. And I'm a little queasy about promoting myself, but thank you for having me do that. I see Trana Badana checking in. I'll see you on Friday, girl. Let's see, Paul Picard's checking in. Danny Max checking in. Frank James, Bob, were those giant Texas bass pure Florida, or mostly northern strain? I know they can't be pure northern. No, they're mostly Florida. Now, here's what that means in Texas for those ShareLunker fish. They're going to check the genetic integrity of those fish through their genetic testing lab. And if they don't test out at a certain standard, which I think is 97% Florida's, they won't use them in their hatchery program. So those fish, if they're not 100% Florida, which I don't know that there are any of those in Texas, but if it does, it's got to check out, and I may be wrong on this, but if I am, it ain't much, 97%, I think they call a pure strain Florida bass. Let's see here, Chris Piper, catching the tail end tonight. Quick question, if a half-acre pond is choked with duck seed, or duckweed, I bet, and other grasses, can carp do the trick, and if so, how many? I love the show. Thanks, Chris. If you have duckweed, grass carp can't eat it because they have to stand on their tails. They can't do that. So before you use grass carp, look at grass carp as a pond management tool. And grass carp can only eat certain kinds of plants. They can't eat cattails. They won't eat lily pads. They're not going to do any of that. You know, but they can't eat any floating plants to speak of to the point where they can control them. But they can eat most of the rooted aquatic plants, you know, like the pondweeds, hydrilla, milfoil. They'll even eat coontail, even though that's not necessarily their favorite thing to eat. I've watched lakes that were choked with coontail where the grass carp devoured the coontail. It just took a while. So here's the point of that question. Pick the right tool. And for duckweed and any floating plants, grass carp are not the right tool. And I don't know where you are, Chris. You know, if you're in the Midwest or even in the South, I'm going to tell you one thing, but if you're in Florida or along the Gulf Coast, I'm going to tell you something different. But if you see this time of year that you've got duckweed, I would dip it out because now it's going to be its lowest point of the year and you can come take it and catch it, you know, get rid of it if you're willing to go to that trouble. South Louisiana. Yeah, you know what, Chris? South Louisiana, odds are pretty high that you're probably going to have to treat that with herbicides. So I would get with, I tell you who I'd go find, Kenneth Rust with Louisiana Pond Management. He's in our resource guide. Get in touch with Kenneth Rust. Ken Rust is a good guy. Steve Lewis checking in from Hot Springs. Danny Mack, good evening. Late to the show. I'll replay when I get home from the bar. Danny Mack, we need to meet one of these days. I love it. All right. Anybody got any more questions? If you do, throw them at me right quick. And I'll tackle them. Let me scroll back and make sure that I've got all these questions. I think I have. Yeah, good questions tonight, guys. This is fun. Okay, So now I want to go back and talk to you about what to think about as we come into spring, since the groundhog didn't see its shadow. Going to have an early spring. Wink, wink, wink. Be prepared when we have fluctuating temperatures like this. Now I'm talking mostly to people in the southern part of the nation. Be ready for early starts of, there's Dave Weber getting in there kind of late, but you're here. Glad to see you, buddy. You've been out doing important stuff. You can go back to the beginning and start over. You're going to start seeing algae before long. Okay, Steve Lewis says tilapia are a good duckweed control. I don't know that I'd put tilapia in South Louisiana because they won't die. Although your point's well taken, Steve. I wouldn't want to use tilapia, and I'm not sure tilapia are even legal in Louisiana. Be sure, if you're going to think about tilapia, be sure they're legal in your state. And I don't know if they're legal in South Louisiana or not. I don't know. But that's a good point. Get ready for algae. And I know tilapia will devour algae, but you can't put tilapia in water until the temperature is 50 degrees going up. So be picky about that. So some of the signs from the pond that you need to be looking for in the next few weeks is at ice off. Start watching for plants. In the south, start looking for plants now. Because if you're going to want to do something about it, you need to know that they exist. You don't necessarily need to do something right now. Paul Picard says tilapia are not legal in L.A., Louisiana. Okay, I kind of thought that, but I didn't remember. So be paying attention to your water temperatures. If you don't have a thermometer, go get one. Start checking your temperatures. As your water temperature hits about 55 to 58, fish are going to start to feed. If you're feeding your fish, that would be a good time to feed them. Let's see. Lance Faber says, should I be concerned with 20 to 30 pelicans landing on my pond? I've kind of got mixed emotions about that, Lance, because they can't dive. Now, if they're going to stay there, they got something to eat. So pay attention to them. Now, they're federally protected. You're not even supposed to torment them or scare them off the water. But if you go out fishing in your boat and they happen to be there and they fly away, I don't know what to tell you about that. But should I be concerned? Yeah, I'd be concerned. But I wouldn't be nearly as concerned about 20 pelicans because they can't dive. Now, they can eat a big fish. So if you got fish coming up in shallow water and those pelicans are shallow eating your fish, then be concerned. But if you had 20 cormorants, I'd be way more concerned about them. And oftentimes those birds go hand in hand. You see pelicans, it's common to see cormorants. Jennifer Royce, hi Bob, what would be the best way to control cattails on a half-acre pond before they take over? I guess that is West Virginia. There are several different herbicides that you can use to control cattails. What I would do there is talk to Solitude Pond Management Company. They've got offices all over the eastern seaboard. They can help you with that. Now, if I was going to do it myself, I would probably use an aquatic brand of glyphosate. Now, I know glyphosate's getting a lot of bad press, and probably rightly so. But that's what I've used in the past on cattails. Now, I do know there's another herbicide. My guys do that. I've stopped actually paying attention to herbicides because you kind of get to a point, at least I've gotten to a point where I'm going to go do what I enjoy doing more, and, killing weeds is not one of my favorite things. So I delegate that to my guys. So my guys are going to be the ones that know that. That's why, I'm going to tell you, call a pond management company in your neck of the woods. And Solitude's a good one over there. Scott Hanners, I've been experiencing a bluegill fish kill. Uh-oh. I have a 2-acre pond here in Alabama. I took 3 specimens to Auburn University. Below is the response I've received so far. It's kind of lengthy, but I thought I would share. We're still waiting from some test results. But this is what we know. I'm going to read it, Raquel. All right, you've got a parasite infestation on the gills, but considered in a normal range. The gills were swollen. The liver was pale, suggesting a systemic disease. Leaning towards a water quality issue that's making the fish susceptible to a bacterial infection. Looks like the bacteria is Aeromonas, a typical opportunity. Okay, all right. I see Dick Tabbert. Hey, Dick. Okay. Here's what I'm going to tell you. Okay, Scott, here's what I want you to do. Start feeding your bluegill. If you don't have aeration, get aeration. Start moving that water. The more you move it, the more you can cleanse it. If you're feeding your fish, if you're not feeding them, start feeding them. Go buy some Aquamax MVP. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to medicate that feed. Listen to me now. You may want to take some notes, come back and listen again because I'm going to run out of time here. I'm just going to give you the recipe real quick. If you'll take a small bottle of vegetable oil or Karo syrup, either one. Karo syrup is probably a little more palatable, just a small bottle of that, and get 2 ounces of any antibiotic from the feed store. Go to your Purina dealer and just buy an antibiotic. It doesn't matter if it's erythromycin, penicillin, doesn't matter. Pick an antibiotic. Mix that antibiotic with that Karo syrup really, really well, and then take a sack of fish food, pour it into a tub or a wheelbarrow, and then drizzle that mixture with the antibiotic on it. And then take a hoe and mix it in real well, and feed that feed to your bluegills and feed it to them for at least 14 days. So if they've got some kind of a bacterial infection, which is probably the second thing that's attacked them from the stress of the water quality, then you can start to cure the illness of that. You can cure the incidence of that bacterial infection. And we got a number of customers that are pushing the envelope with productivity in their ponds, and water quality gets to be an issue. So I have them medicate the feed in the spring and the fall both when the water temperature is on its way up and the water temperature is on its way down, so that we can mitigate the risk of diseases in fish. Hi, David Rikes. How you doing, buddy? Let's see, Dave Weber. Oh, no, unhappy water. You got it, buddy. You got happy water. You're just a happy guy. Debbie Dobbs Lusk, my girlfriend. Oh, my wife checked in. Dan Drollop, water pH of 5.4. Can I just spread bags of lime over the water everywhere? Dan, let me tell you what to do. The only kind of lime you should use in pH of 5.4 is ag lime, which is calcium carbonate. Don't use hydrated lime, quick lime, hot lime, none of that. No calcium hydroxide, no calcium sulfate, no gypsum. You need to be using calcium carbonate. You got to get the carbonate levels up and the calcium levels up to get the alkalinity up to buffer the pH. That's what you need to do. Good gosh, folks. What a fun evening. I'm so glad you joined us for the State of the Union of Pond Management as you pond meisters. Dan says, same I use for food plots. Probably so. If you're liming a field, you're using ag lime, which is calcium carbonate. That's what you need to use. All right, he says TY. I'll say YW. You're welcome. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning in. It's always fun to hang out with you guys. We appreciate you checking us out. Go to pondboss.com. Click like here. Share this video to your timeline. Hashtag PondBoss Magazine in the comments section. You're eligible for a drawing for a hat and a mug. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thanks to Purina Mills and Texas Hunter for their sponsorships. So until next Wednesday, we're going to say adios and see you then.